all the tarot cards that have an archetype associated with them. And those cards are called the trump cards. And there's, 21 of them. And then there's also what they call the pip cards. And there you have, the swords, the cups, the wands, something else. And then you have, like you might have like a knight of cups. So the tarot deck is made up of 71, 74 cards. But what I wanted to focus on next is I wanted to look at, what does it take to actually do a tarot reading, and why might we actually be interested in that? And so this first presentation, we're gonna do a quick example of a tarot reading, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about the alchemy of the tarot, because I think if we can see that the tarot maybe has, something of an alchemy, just like dreams have, then, that gives it an extra, significance. That says that that there is a synchronicity that is at work here. That is, and it's not fortune telling. It's more, like, what is the commentary for my situation in the moment? Oh, good, we've got a Zen. So a Zen, what I want you to do is, like, especially when I go through this example, I want you to pop in and then, like, give your interpretation, because I know you do tarot. And so, and it'll be interesting to get your take on this as well. But first, let me talk about the alchemy of the tarot. So the alchemists believe that the material is alive and that you could actually participate in the material. That the participation in the material changes not only the material, but the analyst, because it has all become one state of participation. So that's kind of my overview on working with the tarot. Now, Hillman said, and this is a quote, that the basic stuffs of personality, salt, sulfur, mercury, and lead, are concrete materials. The description of the soul, aqua pingus or aquas ardens, as well as words for the state of soul, such as albedo and negredo, incorporate invents that one can touch and see. The work of soul making requires corrosive acid, heavy earth, ascending bursts. There are sweating kings, dogs, bitches, stenches, urine, and blood. And I think that, just that description, you can definitely see that in some of the archetypal, in the tarot, in the cards. So how do we treat these images, these tarot cards? What should our view be? Taken singly, they're archetypal metaphors representing the major stages and transitions of life. To make these come alive, though, to communicate with them, we have to move past seeing them as metaphors. And this is kind of interesting, because Bosnak, what he says is that when you do dream interpretation, the first thing you have to do is you have to avoid the obvious. Because if you get sucked into the obvious, then you're going to miss, the deeper connections. And so for me, and when I work on my own dream interpretation now, I tend, initially I avoid, bringing in any archetypal. Instead I just look for a narrative. I just try to connect it to the images and with the feeling. So images are living substance, and therefore we can communicate with them as presences if we're going to treat these alchemically. So the first notion of an image is that it is a presence, not a metaphor. And this is from Henry Corbin. These presences are agents. The presence and the encounter is one phenomenological entity. The whole work is about this encounter. In the encounter, the one who encounters and the one who is encountered is indivisible. You cannot divide the dreamer from the dream. So if we go from the aspect that the material is alive, you work the material and you wait for the material to come to life. things will become alive and jump at you, whether it is in text or images. The idea is not to focus on the person so much as what the material is trying to express, that we are trying to enliven and honor the message. And and we see that in Craig's dream group too. It's, we try to make the dream come alive. Craig goes through and he does a lot of amplification on the dream before we really try anything. So in a dream, you do not encounter metaphors. You encounter beings, you encounter substantial presences. But as you work with them, as you go deeper into the encounter, they begin to yield metaphors. So the metaphor comes afterwards. You can't start with the metaphor. So metaphor is a process in which some of us encounter with the presence. Something is moving towards meaning and mentality, and therefore passes through this being a metaphor. But most encounters with presence never become metaphor, so we have no idea what they are about. And I think this is kind of the idea of living symbolically too. We have to work at it to get the metaphor going. But first, you have to encounter the presence, not as an event, but as an experience, not as a concept, but as something you relate to. I like the idea of treating the tarot cards we lay out as like the unfolding of a dream. We need to look at the sequence of the tarot cards. We lay out with a hopeful expectancy. This goes back almost to like remember the magician, and and Jung said that the way that magic happens is that you have to look at it with a hopeful expectancy. You have to have that attitude. So we see an unfolding of the narrative before we look for any meaning. To feel it as a presence, imagining living beings speaking and interacting. And this is how we change them into something alive and meaningful with interesting comments and insights. So, even in the dream world, it's like, we wouldn't want to look at something and say, oh, that's the anima, right away, because it's like, no, what does this feel like? What's this present? What, even if her stance, even if her context is the anima, what's really interesting at the moment as a presence is what she's doing, not what she stands for as a metaphor. So the book that I've been using for my practice in learning to read these things, she has kind of a methodology about that, about how to go about that. So that's where what I'm about to quote now comes from, as far as how to go about doing it. So we always begin with a question and mean it. What do I see in these cards? Extend this question to where to start. Do you read it from left to right, center outwards? So pose the question to the cards. You speak first. Activate your power of observation, not feeling, training to see. Ask yourself, how do the elements from one card translate into the other? For example, what are the flowers and embellishments on the pip cards doing? Is the card cluttered, airy, crowded, empty? What action are the characters in the trump cards engaged in? Identify the situation first. If it is straightforward, then follow it left to right, regardless of the direction the character faces. Direction is completely dependent on the situation. And we'll mostly be working with like 3 cards, but the question is, well, do you start from left to right, which would be typical, like, just like you read a sentence, or you go from right to left or center outwards? State the function of each card, formulate a sentence that encapsulates as the primary idea, and keep it simple, i.e. a long sentence is a death sentence. And one of the great things I really like about this book is that pretty much in all cases, she'll manage to state the basic narrative in one sentence. And you see that like, oh yeah, that feels right. So when in doubt, the first card down is the querent. Otherwise, agency is determined through context. Establish what is happening, select what is important, and then zoom in on the powerful narrative. And and you know, I have a tarot reading document that has like a whole bunch of examples, and I'll put the link for that, you know, in the chat here in a little bit. Just under, you know, but hang on to that link because the thing keeps growing. I think it's like 34 pages right now. Let's see if I can, if I've got the example. Yes. So here's the example that we're going to use. And remember, as in, I'm going to have you give an interpretation of this too at the end, and you know, just to kind of compare. Now, this at the start of the, you know, the book, the examples she uses are only using the trump cards. So we have 3 trump cards. In the practice that I've been doing, I've only been using the trump cards, you know, just to initially get the feel of it. So this is not with the full deck. So that there are 3 trump cards here is not, you know, surprising at all. So in the book, the first thing that she looks at in this is she says, well, look at the hands. There is a rising tone. Here, the hands are down here. They come up to the center. And then in this one, you know, they're actually raised. So the way she interpreted this was very simple. I will rise again and show them, you know, the sort of the wing beam. Now I took a more Jungian approach to this. And I said, well, caught between the worlds, he's authentically, you know, he authentically seeks, you know, using dedication, because the magician's very dedicated. But in focusing on the recent circumstance, because look where he's looking back where he was caught between the worlds. He's caught in confusion, you know, over the devil, the devil represents confusion. So he's falsely believing that progress was made, but he's actually tied to, you know, and unaware of the confused basis that he's working on. So he's not really moved beyond the hangman over the abyss, but only professes to have. And I don't know if you want to take a crack at this or not, as in, but if you do, come on in. Do you have any comments on this one, as in? Okay, so I guess as in is.
Can I ask something? Can I ask something? Yeah.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, that's great, Greg. I'm just confused. I'm just joining up again, and you're talking about the devil, and it looks like on the right you see the devil image, and it's creating confusion, and I'm just wondering again. How to stay out of that confusion is in this card suggesting by rising above it. Is that the answer in this tarot card?
I don't know that there is an answer in this. I think to me, this is more of an observation. It's that, and I'm also, you know, given my experience, I'm also not saying that I read this at all correctly, you know, so Zen might come in and say something totally different, but, you know, but this caught between the 2 worlds, you know, this is kind of where you're lost. You know, a lot of things have been rejected. You know, the magician, though, he kind of knows how to work circumstances, but he's looking back. But the outcome was confusion. And that's why I'm like, no, you know, you thought you raised the, you know, you authentically worked to get out of it, but you ended back up in confusion. So wherever you think you got, you didn't. Now, how to get out of it, that would be like another question, you know, I guess that would be the question.
Yeah, but I find it fascinating, yes. And again with yeah, in the old world it was called pan, you know, creating a panic, you know, and
Oh yeah,
of course, and a panic is of course a confusion which stops you thinking, like you totally cannot think anymore. And yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, and so I've been doing a number of readings for myself, and well, some of them have been downright embarrassing, although pretty accurate, as to my, various confusion and things. And so here's what I really like about this. What I really like about this is that it's kind of like throwing the I Ching, but the I Ching, of course, only has what, 64 possible outcomes, and then you kind of have to, you know, project, like, how those metaphors might apply. But if you actually believe in synchronicity, and that if you think that intent can help us to bring things out of the unconscious, then I'm finding there's really something to it. I'm really connecting with it, so I'm being quite fascinated by it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
Do you have any follow-on comments, Azin?
I really didn't hear your question. I was moving around. I'm having my breakfast. So if you had a question, if you repeat, I would be glad to answer.
Oh, I think Nia's question was, whether, or I'm sorry, Net's question was, well, how do you find your way out of it? And what I said was like, well, this is just saying the state. You'd have to do another set of three to find out, what the suggestion for that would be. But and I guess the other thing too is that, Zen, if you'd like to bring in some examples sometimes of these things, that that could be good too, because I know you're like way more experienced than I am. How many years have you been doing this?
Oh, many years, but I never had the chance to study tarot. And I'm missing your sessions because it's a little bit early for me here. But I never focused on learning the meaning of the cards. I was just practicing or just using tarot as a daily practice for me. Whenever I have a question or I need clarity on a subject, I do tarot. And what I want to say was that tarot cards are like archetypes, because they have the dark side and the light side. Like if it's the reverse, if the card is reversed, you see all these negative aspects of the card, and then you can improve, you can work your way into that consciousness and receive the gifts. So I don't know if you remember or not, but last year I had a series of dreams with tarot cards, and one of them, there were tarot cards that were like gates, huge gates. Each card was a gate, and I would go inside. I would open the gate and go inside the card, and it was a whole consciousness behind every card. So it's fascinating. I really, really want to work more and understand the dynamism of tarot. It's always surprising. And what is interesting is with the same subject, I usually receive same cards. Like for a relationship for the last 2 years, I'm receiving a certain set of cards for that relationship. That means I'm really stupid, and tarot has to tell me something times and times and times and times throughout 2 years. But it's interesting that on the same subject you get same cards. So and I would really, really love to have a group to work on tarot, like our dream group that we work on dreams. We can have
I would join that for sure.
Yeah, I'm expecting you to start it. And I will join, and we can learn together.
Yeah, no, I would definitely,
It's magical.
co-host it or whatever,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's all I had, Craig, and you're all set to go with with your presentation. And thank you, Azim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. That was just fascinating. Really, I mean, well, we're gonna try to finish up the animus today. I don't know if we're gonna get it in, but I mean, a lot of different things have come up. I mean, you know, essentially that. Well, I would say the one thing that really is just so palpable to me, anyway, is that that the lower animus is in control of everyone and our whole world. I mean, this one of opinion and of statements that well, I was telling Kat, it reminds me of, it's very powerful. It's unbelievably powerful, unbelievably impressive. And it reminds me of these Welsh bowmen, you know, of King Alfred and everyone else. I mean, they could pull a bow back 600-pound bow and let the arrow go. I mean, they were so they used it so much, and you can see when they look at their arms, their arms are just like another being. So our mental capacities have grown like that, and they're very impressive. And yet, if you take that sort of distortion, but unbelievably impressive distortion, and compare it with the hunter-gatherer tribes of how they valued the feminine, relatedness, feeling, a connection to the earth, it's just totally different. And so the whole problem of the animus really is that the higher animus is, or the animus's main role is one of revelation, you know, and revelation that creates a symbol. Is that what it's doing now? You know, I mean, it is totally isn't. And I mean, it is all focused on material equations and development of things. And then of course we think that that's the all high power. It's the God right now. So anyway, we're in a very distorted world. So now here you are, a woman, and you need to connect with the higher animus, and you're faced with what it really has been is the rest of that body of that Welsh bowman is completely undeveloped, and his left arm is not very or the rest of his body is not very valuable to the bowman, you know. So the rest of life is not very valuable to the to this lower animus, the one of opinion and of technology. But anyway, so where are women today who are freed from tasks and faced with intellectual demands, and the biological demand has progressively decreased, and she seems to be confronted with an inescapable demand that shows up in neuroses, you know, really. It is something that if this demand is not met, I mean, it comes up in me, you know, God is trying to stir you in every way that you can be stirred, you know, and you know, this neurosis is the suffering of a soul which has not discovered its meaning. That's really what all neuroses that are not related to some kind of real disease or chemical imbalance is concerned with, you know. So So this current, you know, we're, the law, there is a law of the time moment. It's in all of us. The law of this time moment of Kairos, to which all are subject and from which we cannot escape. None of us can. And we're, you know, remember, we're in the dying throes of Pisces, you know. You know, what is the answer to Job? You know, that the pleroma must become conscious in man. And this is the famous Christ Pantocrator, you know, that within us on the left, you'll see is both a God and a Homo sapiens, a human being. And then in the middle, you see what the right half doubled actually looks like. And then on the right is this son of a carpenter. And in this middle is this. Now, this, if we do not, the law of the time moment is that must become conscious in human beings. And if we ignore it, we're going to experience suffering of soul, you know. So, and so this, it's obscure what its terms are. We don't really know. I mean, I think the only way I know of is through a jigsaw puzzle that is created by images, which we lend our attention to and make it a piece of the puzzle and then put it together. So this current moment seems to require a widening of consciousness. You know, they said, you know, who was it? Well, Edward Edinger says, you know, that that Jesus was the last ram and the first fish, and that the discovery of the unconscious, by, you could say it's by Jung, what he is the last fish and the first water bearer. And he what Edinger tells that story of you know, someone, it's a Jewish story, who discovered water. And the answer is, well, I don't know. I can tell you who didn't discover water: the fish. Okay. So the only way that you can discover the unconscious is to realize, like Gary said, that it's alive, you know, in us. We haven't discussed the dream yet, but Diane had that dream where if she painted her thumb gray, the fairy world becomes alive, you know, it becomes living and moving. So I mean, this happened not only in the discovery of the unconscious as a living entity that exists with us, that middle figure in Christ Pantocrator, but it's also in quantum physics and other sciences. You know, imperceptible energies up until now, unknown to awareness, are just being discovered all the time. These new worlds with new laws that govern them have both appeared in both the unconscious and in science. Brings what is remote near, expands the range of sense perception over the entire earth and far beyond it. And it's this extensive illumination of consciousness is expressed, you know, and so now all this is addressed to the woman in the animus problem. The increase in consciousness and that with this psychic implies that this psychic energy that we possess will be going down entirely new paths, not the old path, an entirely new path, one that's freed from tending the hearth and from the biological task, and now this psychic energy can go to the psychic energy can go down new paths. So now culture depends on such a deflection. I would say the astrological ages depend on such a deflection. And the capacity to bring it about is the animus's special skill, the revelatory aspect of it. So this process involves special difficulties because it affects us like a sin or a misdeed, as shown in the myths involving the fall of man, the theft of fire by Prometheus, and that's how it experienced in our lives, because it concerns we're going to revolt against a tyrant, the tyrant of the lower animus, because because we're in somewhat of a possession by it. It concerns an interruption or of a reversal of what's been going on for thousands of years. It's a very dangerous venture. For this reason, it's always been connected with religious ideas and rites, and the religious mystery with its symbolical experience of both a death and a rebirth means we've entered into the mysterious and living miraculous process of transformation. So now it's very mysterious how this happens, because it's through words, the words separate man from nature. And this achievement of words brings us into this tragic position where we are on the one side chained to the rock like Prometheus, our bodies, and yet we have the fire of the gods, at the same time. So it's a suspension. We no longer are the child of Mother Nature. Well, we'll never not be, really, but we're driven out of paradise. In other words, I would say what she's saying, really, in a participation mystique with nature. We'll never be that anymore. But we're also not God. So and I think it is so important, at least in my own thinking, that this wisdom is tied to the body and its natural laws, to the biological form. I mean, I just say, if the wisdom, Sophia, who's the sum total of all archetypes, the wisdom of God, if her wisdom doesn't have to do with bodies, I don't know what it is about, what wisdom it is. Has to do, it's just this strange thing that the bodies or the nature wants to see itself. Once the wisdom that created the bodies, this mute wisdom, wants to become conscious in a new way, and that really the evolution of that came through the discovery of language through words, which is called logos, So we come back to the animus problem. It leads between nature and this word type. When they talk about spirit, the only thing I can say about spirit is it's immaterial. It's not connected to the earth. I mean, all it really provides is a abstract way of forming patterns that are not available when you're walking on the earth. The spirit can discover and form patterns that we can't. And it also, I believe, I just don't, I mean, it's my surmise is that spirit is also the one that is to do with words, with this mystery of words. So how do we experience this problem? How do we experience the spiritual principle? Now she's going to get into possession. Okay, we're going to go through we can go through this long idea of possession. You know, we experience it in the father, the teacher, the elder brother, the husband, the friend, the lover, and in objective documents of the spirit, the sacred texts, in churches, states, in government, state. That's a god, current god right now, and it's a demonic god, by the way, and all these institutions, as well as in the creation of the science and arts, and to usually direct access to the objective forms of spirits. This is not true so much anymore, but it was usually experienced through a masculine guide or an intermediary. And now this is where we get into the projections and the fact that the projections are a step on the road, but they're only a step, okay? Because if the projection is permanently established, the woman meets this guide or intermediary of these objective forms of the spirit, science or anything, that is it has to do with mind, and she would project upon him, and we're going to get into this later. She wants her man, or this one she's projected on, to do the work of transformation for her, so she doesn't have to transform herself. He'll do it for her. She can just go be a bus rider with him. That's not going to happen. It's not going to work eventually. So this, if the projection is positive, it results in a positive relation, and it's permanently established, and that continues without conflict, everything's fine, except the woman remains unconscious and she does not transform. So no longer today can she remain unconscious. Something else is demanded of her. Otherwise, she'll start to do what Jung said, that she'll get symptoms. And the symptoms are really going to be of soul sickness. Okay. It's going to be your soul is sick. So, and that's unsustainable, And so we have to become conscious. Women cannot, and neither can men. What men do is they project on the anima, and then he says, well, I don't have to have anything to do with relatedness or eros. I can just focus on say the philosophy of language, or some dry science, and a lot of Jung's male students, Marie-Louise von Franz would say, when she read their books, where is the anima? There is no soul. There's in these, it's just too intellectual. So that we both do this, but it's in two different forms. So now there's another aspect of this. Neither one of us can stay in a state of projection, because the incongruity between the image and the image bearer is at some point going to be unmasked, and the archetype that the animus or the anima represent will never coincide with an individual man, and even less so if he is individual, because individuality is the opposite of the archetype. What anybody who is very individual is not typical in any way. Typical, no type. they are in a unique intermixture of characteristics, if they're conscious, which in themselves may be types, but that's not how they're after they're combined. And so with the whole idea is the discrimination between the projected image and the person. So we become aware, to our great confusion and disappointment, that this man.
Can I
Yes, go
ask a
ahead,
question?
please, Annette. Yeah.
I just would like to ask, in general, what I would see in people is certainly not a wish to individuate. What people usually complain of is loneliness and wanting to belong. And this is why we see the social media going mad. It's because people want to belong. They want to belong in all kinds of groups and places. And so that goes right against what actually Jungian therapy is advocating sometimes, I feel. And that is why I sometimes feel, is it a bridge too far for a lot of people? Like, do we all have to individuate? Like in general, it's what I see is that people don't struggle with their individual ways. They struggle with their depression, with their loneliness, with their lack of connection, all of that. And I'm wondering how is that standing within the Jungian philosophy?
Well, von Franz said, and we're going to really go into this too, is that, and so did Baba Yaga, that depression and loneliness is really sometimes the first step in becoming becoming whole. Christiana Morgan had this. Zine, just let me finish the story. Christiana Morgan had this wonderful vision of a river of bodies going down the river. Yeah, and there's all these people standing on the bank, or not a lot, but they're standing on the bank, and they're reaching out to these people. 1 out of 1,000 would see them. And then they would stick their hand out and they would pull them up out of the water. And then they would show them a star.
Yeah.
Now these ones here, I mean, the whole idea is what she's saying is you can live unconsciously, immersing yourself in social media or anything else, but you're going to suffer a sickness which we seem to have developed a tolerance for, and that is sickness of soul. We don't care, because we have so many things to drug ourselves, to basically numb ourselves so we don't suffer from this sickness of soul. Social media, television, just mindless watching of videos, drugs, alcohol, sex, watching the stock market all day. I mean, supposedly staying busy, but that's just putting off the problem. Yeah, go ahead, Azine, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Annette. I don't know the answer completely. Yes, but it's a very good point.
I just wanted to say that individuation is not really a choice. What is a choice is doing it consciously.
Yes.
So there are elements. Libido is bringing unconscious elements to the surface all the time. It's like a river, okay? So it goes through collective unconscious, comes through personal unconscious, comes to consciousness, and it becomes a part of our ego. So this is an ongoing process. It's always coming towards us. And if we don't pay attention, if we are not conscious, they probably possess us most of the time for a long, long time. And then somehow we may get integrated with them. But doing it consciously, which we call individuation process, is being aware, and putting some doing it willingly. Like when you're doing active imagination, you're receiving these elements consciously, or you are thinking about your dreams or doing a tarot card, whatever, or you notice what is happening in your life. So at first steps, it is true, individuation is usually discussed under the archetype of wanderer. And they say that nobody goes to wanderer willingly. Most of the time, something bad happens to us. We got divorced, we got sick or something, and then we have to start the hero's journey. The hero's journey starts with the wanderer, not with the child, not with the fool. So that's how the individuation process starts in us. We don't choose it. Most of the time, we are pushed into it. So at first steps, what happens is you feel separated because you're individuating, right? You're understanding about yourself and how you're different from your siblings, from your friends, from the women, from your culture and other humans. But the good thing is that, at least in depth psychology, the good thing is that our individuation process goes through working with archetypes, which are common in all people. So after a certain point, you start connecting to people, not on the surface, but through the archetypes. I understand the child in you, although I have a very different child within as an archetype in myself, but I understand the child in you. I understand isolation. I understand whatever you're telling me because I have inner experience. So it separates us at the beginning, but eventually it is the one thing that connects us as humans.
Yes, that's really, and that is fascinating. That journey is fascinating. But I was just wondering, thanks a million.
Yeah, it is, you know, she mentions it's the inescapable demand of the time moment. One of the reasons it is because we have no organized religion anymore. The images of the myth that used to serve us don't provide an adequate bridge to the self. So instead, you know, we put them everywhere else now. We can't put them on the in the organized church anymore because it doesn't. That was what, yeah. You know, Jung and Emma Jung both say, particularly among Protestants. Okay, I don't know about Islam or Sufi or Sunnis, Azine, but at least in the Protestants, since they didn't have any literature, I mean ritual, they really are lacking. So instead, we put the images of myth go into career, meaning. This is the meaning of our lives. Career, narcissism, materialism, cult, sex, political ideology, fundamentalist religions, science, social causes, or neurosis. So these archetypal contents fall into containers that are too small for them. You know, this is from Edward Edinger. So now remember what she says is this is an inescapable demand. Okay. It's the law of the Kairos moment that this is being asked of us. Now, of course, there's all kinds of ways to just ignore it and die and have an obituary written about us and live a happy life, you know. But we didn't. We really did not accomplish what our ontological task was, which was to be the vessel of these images and to be the bearer of symbols and to create the evolution of consciousness in man, you know, of God consciousness, of what, well, you could call it more like this. It's the what Jung says, that the pleroma must become conscious in man. That wisdom that created life in the stromatolites 3.5 billion years ago wants to step out into time and space. I mean, anyway, it's but I would say yes, it can easily be avoided. We don't have to avoid it. What we're really talking about is the people who feel they can't avoid it. It's like after you go through the third chakra, through Manipura, and you experience the fire of Manipura, it will never go out in you. Once you realize the psyche is real, let me just say that suddenly someone speaks to you and says something that you in your dreams, or your dreams are so powerful. It's amazing to me how powerful our dreams speak to us, and we just go like, oh yeah, okay, all right, what's on TV? I mean, we don't feel that there's an obligation here. This is why LSD is a cheap way to do this. I mean, there should be an obligation. There's a moral obligation that's created by the image. So anyway, yes, we can certainly remain unconscious. There's no problem with that, and we'll have a happy life. But there are some who are going to experience anxiety, sleeplessness, a general restlessness, pains, have very odd feelings, and they won't be satisfied. And they're going to be absolutely, at some point in their life, they're just going to be sitting there completely. I mean, I don't know. You can. I have nothing against people who just live a simple life. But there are some people who can't. So this, she goes on about the animus image, some of the ways that it manifests. You either have a projection on someone, your husband or your lover. He's going to do the transformation for you. He's going to go on the hero journey, not you. You're just going to sit back and cut out newspaper clippings about him and put him in a scrapbook. But this is not what the pleroma is demanding of us. It is giving us incredibly powerful tools through the images it sends us. Are we going to respond or not? So this we've kind of went over. It's just some of the really odd things that happen. That when our person we projected the image on, we try with real cunning to force him to be the image that we have, and so we act and actually consciously act very archetypally. We become the anima, and we try to use it to force him to become our animus, our outer animus. If we be the anima all the time, he's going to have to obey us, and what Emma Young says is that when you do become a living anima, which is being very unconscious, really. Yes, you're going to have all kinds of little people around you that are going to respond archetypally to that, and they're going to become the living animus. But both of you are totally unconscious. There's no clarity there whatsoever. You're living. You are not. You are not becoming conscious. So really, hi Tim. We're just getting into the. It's going to get even deeper here. I'm telling you, it's going to get really deep. So here we come to what's most essentially meaningful in the animus problem, that the masculine intellectual component within the woman, she needs to know it, to incorporate it into the rest of her personality. And how does she do it without being possessed by it? It's really, she says something later, and I kind of, we're getting a little late, so maybe I'll finish it next time. But let me just kind of tell you some of the really interesting things she has to say. Is that the how we experience the animus, and I say men are more possessed by the animus than women are. These are people who come to you without any relatedness and only with words, opinions, and arguments. And every single one of them are not related. They have no sense of eros in them. What she's saying too is that logos is very aware of the problem of the suspension between Homo sapiens and the fact that there's a divine aspect in us. Logos seems to have dealt with that problem, not very successfully, because eros did not participate, and it's earth. And if you have spirit that is not in service to the earth, Jung says it is a clever trickster. You will never be enlightened by that. It has to be in service to the earth. But what she says is that the way we see, and I'll go into this a little more carefully because I'm just not going to follow the notes here. It's more from memory, is that that the way it manifests itself is in applying generally valid truths. I mean, generally, statistically speaking, this is true. And it no one can say it's not true. And it has a sense of authority to it. Okay. And yet it in every problem it's posed to, it either has no effect or the wrong effect, because it doesn't address the humanness of every problem. Is a human problem. There are no problems that are not human problems. And when we come at it with this word generally aspect, I mean, that every problem that is addressed should really be addressed initially from the feeling side, from the side of eros, because it has to do with another human being, you know. And the best thing you can do is go up to them silently and hold their hand. Or you can go up to them with all kinds of opinions that are filled with wickedness, poison, and sting, and just and it has no effect or the wrong effect. And it not only injures you and your relatedness with them, it injures you. So this, and now the problem is, and I'll end with this, is that, and yet this force is the most valuable thing in the universe as far as all of us are concerned. IQ, intellectual quotient, the thinking function is the most valuable thing in the universe. And what is not valued is those revelations that come to us that don't come to us through words or through things like that. And so this other world, which is actually more valuable than this stuff, this is just a clever trickster. All of this, it's tricks. There is nothing substantial about it. You have to remember that the logos is a sort of the spiritual word games with no substance. You know, all it can provide is Kat asked at the start of it, we're going to talk about anima as an elemental being, and she says, can there be animus as an elemental being? Well, yes, Diane's horses that she has are elemental beings, but the one that she mentioned, which is is absolutely an elemental being, is Merlin. Now, Merlin does what he's supposed to do. He is not at war with nature. He's the green man. And yet he is the master of words. He's a magician. And he never adds wickedness, poison, or sting into anything he enters. So that's the proper role of the animus. But I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I would say that this, and I said this at the start of this, that this was a problem. It's not, it's first of all, it's a great evolution, because now we have all these technological miracles, everywhere, and yet it can't be worshipped as a god. And it is, if we were to value it in terms of the outer world, it's priceless. But if we value it in terms of our soul, it's worthless. It has no value whatsoever. So where is the value, of being alive? Is it being the richest man in the world? Is it being a king? Or is it being a Taoist sage who has, just lives in harmony with nature? Or the one thing that Marie-Louise von Franz said, that there are some women who are, how the goddess of the Eleusinian mysteries, could make crops. If they were in sync with us, they would make our crops abundant. There are women who make life abundant just by their presence. And she said they exist. They exist. And then there are other women who are possessed by the lower animus, she says, who are Medusa, head full of snakes, and so what we're really getting into here, and I just think that it's so beautiful. So we should just finish it next time. I was hoping to finish it today, but that somehow, some way, we need to get over the fact of how much we overvalue thinking, how much we overvalue judgments and opinion, and how we need to, what really needs to be valued is wordless wisdom, music, the symbols that come up from the depths. That should be our treasure. That should be what we value the most. And it has nothing to do with words. Now, what the words can do, this spirit that has no substance can do, this immaterial world, is it can provide a pattern that will create a constellation, which can be our constellation. It can be our set of stars, which will guide us, our orientation. Who was it? You, Diane, had the dream about the red book that your mother was quoting from in the dream. And I had this dream of, I went into this library and there was this book. Everything that was ever needed to be known about soul was in that book. And it was so thick. And each page was alive, and I'd open up a page. And all I saw over and over again were animals facing the left. And underneath each one, it said prayer. And you'd turn the next page there would be an animal facing to the left, and underneath it, it said prayer. This is the book of wisdom. This is the book of soul. And it had nothing to do with being clever, you know. Well, anyway, I'll finish it next time. But then, and we'll also get started on the anima as elemental being. I want to say one thing. Dahlia asked too about, and maybe you guys can address this. It was a question Dahlia had at the end last time. Is one way, one thing, one sacrifice the woman must make is of her greatest power, and that is that she can force men to do things by her magic, her feminine magic. She needs to say, I know I have that power. I give it up. It creates unconsciousness, and I will be conscious. And so Dahlia was asking, so what is this? What purpose does attraction serve? You know. Well, anyway, maybe people can help her answer that question. Go ahead, Gary.
Wow, just great presentation. I especially liked your drawing with the figure crossing the bridge, and then all the planks are like all these things that cannot satisfy what it is that we actually need, that are just sort of distractions in the end, but endlessly pulls us in.
Containers too small for the
Yeah.
image, for the images of myth.
Yeah, you'll have to send that to me. I really like that, or send it out to the group, or put it as an image in the next email to the group. That would be awesome. Diane, would you like to lead us off?
Oh, well, first of all, I'd like to say that maybe I have a projection on you, Craig, of being the spirit of no substance that can create a pattern, a constellation that guides us. So I might have a projection on you, but I'm aware of it. Then you say that words, and you are that, because you use words in such an effective way to point to what is unspeakable. And speaking of which, I'd like to ask you what stromolites means. You said, yes.
That was one of the wonderful dreams Kat had, or one of the first ones she told us, is that she's walking along on the stepping stones of life, and they are all made, they're stromatolites. These were actually stromato or stromata lights. I think they're actually found in Montana, Tim. That's where they found them. And they are the earliest fossil, earliest life form on the fossil record.
I think that's Australia.
Is it Australia?
Yeah, they grow like at the edge of the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Australia.
But they're 3.5 billion years old. I mean, it was the first signs of non-mineral existence. And Kat had that dream, and so I do mention that every once in a while.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. So words can point to, and you are a master. So regarding that feminine mystique, that the example of Marilyn Monroe comes to mind. She was really imprisoned by it. It was soul killing, and I guess she sacrificed for the rest of us to understand that that doesn't get us what we need or want. That's not what our souls need. And I'd like to say about so projections, to speak to that, in the between men and women, it's sort of an alchemical thing, I think. And it's that attraction sometimes can be deadly, but sometimes can lead you to the right partner. But you have to be very conscious of what's going on. I mean, being conscious of what's happening really helps, you know, being conscious of what you're projecting. And but in the beginning, when you fall in love, that, you know, that doesn't, but you have to gradually become more conscious and try to do the best you can in the relationship. A long-term relationship takes a lot of work. But about the pleroma and the, you know, the fact that I think particularly in the modern world, since, I don't know, the beginning of the industrial age, where we all became just worker bees in the system, and there was no and statistics, you know, medical statistics, psychological statistics, all of that, you know, part of the state, all of the, you know, the Brave New World, Animal Farm, all those things that came up back, I guess, between World War I and World War II left us. And the fact that the church had not kept up with our evolution. That's why, you know, the answer to Job was so important. And so the answer was that we do, at the end of the individuation process, is that we become part of the pleroma. We consciously become the pleroma. That's what's lacking. That's what's creating all of the brutality and inhumanity in the human realm, is that the other is not a human being like you. And so that's why, in order for us to do why we do have a spark of the divine in us, is to become aware of that, consciously aware of that, and to see that in the other as well. So
Yeah,
that's all I have to say.
The I thou. I mean, that's one thing that you know, Lillian Fry-Rohn said that if Jung had been a woman, he would have concentrated a lot more on love and its problems. But I'll say one thing I just was recalling while you were speaking, is that I one time asked my anima, I said, why are you so pretty? Why are you so beautiful? And she says, I think I actually asked this to Inanna, and said, why are you so beautiful? And she says, well, inside me, I just feel utilitarian. She says, but to you, it's an invitation to life. It's veni, 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 you know, come, come, come. You know, it's and you know, Robinson Jeffers, who Tim used to live right near his house, called it divinely superfluous beauty. A beauty which is greater than it really needed to be. And we see this everywhere.
Who said that? Who is that?
Robinson Jeffers. He's a poet who lives in Carmel, and I think that's where Tim grew up. Yeah, he grew up there. But he's a wonderful poet. He's hard to read, his philosophy is very interesting. It's one that is totally devoted to nature, you know.
So a quick question, like I know the pleroma is like the, sort of like the abode of God or the, or the Godhead, but do you have like a better definition, Craig?
Well, what Edinger said too is that it is everywhere. It is this center, a circle whose center is I forget how it goes, but it was it's everywhere. We're swimming.
The center is everywhere and the circumference is
Is
nowhere.
nowhere. Yeah,
Mm.
the center is everywhere and their circumference is nowhere. That actually came from Angelus Silesius. Is wonderful. He's another Meister Eckhart, and he had about 4 or 5 years of these great revelations, and then he went back to being an ordinary man. But yeah, what he said is it's everywhere. Now this is the whole idea in I was reading yesterday about the Caudus pavonus, the peacock. Once it appears in alchemy, that suddenly now you experience everything in a different way. Your eyes are not wide open, they're half closed and half open, and you see both the invisible things, and we're going to talk about the invisible things next time, that the anima here's what anima is really supposed to do. Just highlight this. The role of the anima in a man or in a woman is to be the one who makes the invisible and obscure things visible. She provides the image. All of these dream images, which you see in your dreams, she made them visible for you. They were there all along in the pleroma, which you're swimming in. It's full. Jung says when we actually lose this illusion of being alive, we're going to be swimming in the pleroma, which is the realm of images. So the pleroma, is sort of what you would also call Brahman. It would be the sound of Om. And yet it's one that's full of images, and the one out of which all life came, and in a mysterious way. And it wants, and what's the principle of the pleroma? Lila, play. It loves to bounce like a little baby goat from here to here, and to it loves jokes. It loves, where did humor come from? That came from the pleroma. The pleroma was a comedian too, and it's just it is absolutely this miraculous thing, but we're swimming, that's what Edinger, that joke about the one who didn't discover water is the fish, because the only way you can discover water is to have a Archimedean point that is not in it, so you can see what it is. But anyway,
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'd like to lead into maybe Azine. So it's creation. The pleroma is creation. It's the infinite variation of creation. So there is a story, a Persian story about the simurgh, and it's about it's the one and the many. And Azine, could you tell that story about the simurgh?
Yeah, it's a journey that birds, hundreds of thousands of birds start to find their leader, and they go through so many obstacles, different valleys, like valley of refinement, valley of love and stuff. And through this journey, they get burned, their beaks are broken, they die, they fall off the sky. And at the end, only 30 of them reach to the Seymour's place. And when they get there, the guy who was the guard said, what do you don't have anything to do with Seymour, you're a bunch of broken birds. And you don't have anything to offer to Seymour. So at the last disappointment, they fall, and suddenly the whole world around them becomes a mirror, and they see Seymour. In Farsi, C means 30. So they see Seymour, 30 birds, and that's who they are. It's the self, basically. So they realize that they are the leader. Actually, this myth is one of my core myths of new leadership. I wrote an article on it. I can share it with you. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, the
Thank
whole
you.
goal,
Please.
yeah, the whole goal of the pleroma in the beginning, I think, was that Mozart wrote his music. You know, was that you know, the kabuki theater in Japan came about, that the dancers in India did their dancers, and Ceylon, and the cave paintings of Lascaux. That's what it had in mind before it began, you know, and it did come. It's still manifesting. You know, don't you think? I would say, you know, I'm very interested in what's going to happen, but I think we hit and Tim, you can totally disagree with this, but it seems to me that we hit a dry hole right now since the 1950s. But I'm open to scorn for that claim.
You mean in terms of art?
Well, of this absolutely you know, world transforming creative aspects. You know, I think there's a lot, but it's just not valued like it used to be. I mean, where's James Joyce and Picasso and all those figures, you know, Miles
Well, if I could
Davis.
make a comment on
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
one thing that I think is not really helping that aspect is the fact that all art is so unbelievably commercialized now that all the greats are very relatively undiscovered, and you
Yes.
have to do a lot of digging to find the really talented artists nowadays. Because I think it was probably the most recent time period where good art was actually popular, because that's what people liked, and that's, you know, it was the 60s. Then everything past that just got very commercialized, and it was all about just selling things.
Yeah, Tim
So now if you
could
want to
give
find
you
good art,
Tim
gotta
could
dig
give you
for
a
it.
2-hour lecture on that. But you know, Kafka and Van Gogh, they didn't sell anything their whole lives. You know, I mean, maybe one $200 painting, but
And we, the public, general public, is always behind the artist. The artist is a pioneer in this creativity, I think.
Well, Zen, would you like to go next?
Sure. About art, I think what happens is that more people are experiencing the creative process, and it is all art, but I believe there's still good art and bad art. So most of it is bad art, but it is art. But anyways, I want to say something that is important in general when we're discussing the Anima Animus theory. I think Anima and Animus is just another structure, like alchemy is a structure. And so I want to quote Jung. It's a very important quote that it may take us a while to understanding. It looks simple, but it's really hard to keep it in mind. Then that Jung says psyche is like a soup. It's not a jigsaw puzzle. What does that mean? It means that we are swimming in this existence, that everything is a soup, okay? But we label things, we categorize things. We call this child archetype, we call this psyche, self, animus. But these are all a structure that we are imposing on existence. That means that so if a structure is just a structure, what's the use of it? If anima and animus or alchemy is just a structure, and you can approach life and psyche and existence from different with different structures, and it all works. So what is the importance of having this structure? I always use this example. If you all imagine a cup in your head and you tell us later that, well, how was your cup? We realize that it is a really, really different one for each of us. That's individuation, right? But the good thing is, if I ask you to give me a cup, you will not give me a plate. You will give me something in the context of cup. So when we talk about structures like anima and animus, we tend to make them literal, right? Like a religion. Like there's an anima, there's an animus. This is all our mind. This is the structure we create because we want to talk about stuff with each other. We want to talk about cups. But we have to find a common ground. So the reason I choose anima and animus as a good structure for my inner journey, for my personal growth, is that it explains things to me and it's very practical. Unlike what people talk about, say about Jung, that it's deep, it's too deep, it's not practical. To me, Jungian psychology is extremely practical because I have connection with unconscious. If you don't have connection with unconscious, these are all just abstract ideas. One of the things that they criticize about the theory of anima and animus, and I remember Kat last time talked about it, that men also have feelings. Why do we contribute feelings to anima? Why do we contribute thinking to animus? Women think as well. So the theory, the way it explains it, and I like it, is that it relates these features, these capabilities to male and female principle, right? So actually in this structure, as a woman, my access to logics, to goals, to power is more straight easily than a man. It is easier for me to relate to animus than if a man wants to relate to animus, because for him, he has to go through anima and then find the animus within the anima. So it's not saying that women are incapable of thinking. It means that it's their challenge. So if you want to know how to relate, where is your anima? Where is your animus? The challenge is in the contra, the anima and animus. It's always challenging to experience animus. Like last week, my pressure cooker died, and I thought of putting it on the outside. A man would pick it up and fix it and use it. And then I told myself, no, I have to fix it. I can fix it. So I made an effort, which is beyond gender roles, that I can fix the pressure cooker, and I fixed it. So it presents challenges. It's not on your first level of experience, but it means that both of both genders have access to these principles. It's not misogynist at all. To me, it's not. But I think it's important to realize first that this is just another structure. It's not literal. And then understand this theory properly. We can go very abstract in this theory because in nature it's really deep down in the unconscious. But to me, it's really important to find the practicality of these theories in daily life. Like for women, everybody asks, how can I live my animus? First level is body, muscle, strength, power. Level 2 is words. Talk in structures. Do not ramble for hours. Just talk, fix what you want to say and say it in 5 minutes or within a structure, an hour, whatever. So there's level, any skills, any ability is related to animus, any discipline. As Jung said, being a man means having a goal, having goals in your life. So I think the practical side of this theory is really, really important.
Thank you, Hussein. Tim, would you like to go next?
Sure. Boy, there's a lot to respond to here. It's really fascinating stuff. One thing that I'd just like to comment on is the strange demise of the power of art in our time that I kind of attribute, and I get this from Edinger. He talks about the dissolution of the cultural canon. And it seems as though in the 19th century, the cultural canon started to fall apart. And we can see this with Impressionism, when people started to realize that the individual was worthy of attention in about the 1860s, 1880s. There comes this new focus, at least in the Western world, on the individual. And we start to get art that is not just a commentary on the mythology that is shared by the culture, but is about the individual's encounter with the world. And about the same time, religion begins to dissolve a little bit in the cultural canon. And about the turn of the 20th century, we get all these kind of shatterings of cultural experience. The revelations of Darwin shook the foundations of Christianity in particular. And then Einstein and Niels Bohr come along and start shaking the foundations of physics. And meanwhile, the culture no longer agrees on a story. And so ever since then, it's been harder, I think, for artists to grapple with the cultural story. And we turn instead to the individual story. And that's what abstract expressionism is about. You know, this is what I feel in tech with the rest of the world. And ever since then, it's not so much that the artists aren't as good as they used to be, but that there's no way to talk to the whole culture. You just talk to a segment that you understand. And so, for instance, one of the big frustrations for me is, how in the world do I speak to a culture that is so shattered? All I can do basically is just declare my own reality and say, if anybody picks up on that, you know, give me a call. Otherwise, it's all just floating in the chaos. And what we need is a kind of humanity story that works for all of the globe. And globalization makes it necessary because we are now a world community, but we don't have a world story. And I don't think we can have that kind of really transformative, powerful art until we're able to share a story. I also wanted to respond to Dahlia's question, which I think is just absolutely fascinating. What is it that attraction is all about? And I agree that the woman who becomes an expert in manipulating men with her, let's say, sexual power or her feminine power, needs to relinquish that, just because what's going to happen is the woman is going to take over. It's going to kind of hijack the anima from the man. And all of us are susceptible to that. And one of the focuses of my work has been trying to figure out how powerful that anima is in my life, and how do I deal with that energy that comes from, particularly from a woman that's working with me as a model, who comes into my presence and has a real intense encounter with me. And I feel that pull, I feel that power. And how do I find the resource within myself to say, okay, what she's locking into is my own anima. And if I give that over to her, then she will have hijacked my anima and she can do whatever she wants with it. But if I resist that and I say, I've got to hang on to my own power to recognize that what she's doing is calling my anima into life. And now finally I can see it, I can feel it. And now what am I going to do with my own power? And that whole business of attraction to me has to do with making the unconscious come alive in a new way. So the other animals, I think, recognize beauty like a waterfall or a sunset, but it doesn't grab them because they're so balanced that they don't have the unbalance that creates the desire that that attraction points to. And so by following our attractions with intention, we can find the key to uncover the unconscious.
Thank you, Tim. Tribalism in art. And how do we remain conscious of the animus so that it's a conscious process, not one that just takes us over completely?
Exactly. And of course, when it takes us over completely, it's like jumping into the rushing river. It's exhilarating because you're being carried by the power, but you don't have any control. And so you just go wherever the collective wants to take you.
Right. Great. Ava?
Oh, it's so complex, this. And I really feel right now it's too much negativity to that. Women part of manipulation in some way. I'm thinking about the Clarissa Pinkola as it would be good if we could take something from that side. The woman is not always so dangerous. And okay, but I happened to, right before this meeting, I was looking at a podcast from Jordan Peterson. I don't do it every day, but there was suddenly in the 2-hour podcast, they were talking about the tweet. He was abandoned from Twitter. And suddenly the 3 men was talking about dreams. And Jordan Peterson declared how that dreams are have an objective truth and can help with crisis and so on. And it's I was putting in the link in the chat if someone I was so super surprised because they was going on and suddenly Jordan Peterson's wife was in the dream. That's interesting when we have anima discussion. So but it's in 50 minutes he is talking about excuse my English, in 50 minutes he is just talking about the problem. So if you don't want to see that, but he's grave, serious, and so then suddenly they really are taking on the dream, and it seems like a sign of change too for me, because 5 million viewers as he has in his YouTube channel is not a few, and so on. Okay, I just
Thank you. But for the link and comment, Kat.
I just find it all so very fascinating, and of course Craig's sort of summary of it all, and just amazing. But I'm you know, Azine, I just, again, you always come out with these gems. And I'm kind of like, I think your Spidey skills are really on point, because I've been thinking about working with my animus and things, and I'll give you a brief example of how I'm working with it, because, and how it's proved very helpful. I had a part of the dream course that I'm in was the IDS, the Institute of Dream Studies, and part of the course material was to write on Freud, and I had to help some of my mentees with that. And it got to the point where, you know, I'm not saying Freud is dry or uninteresting or anything like that, far from it, but it got to a point where I was for 3 days like writing things out in hand, and like, you know, and I found it really frustrating. And then I was kind of like, I got so mad because it just didn't make sense. And then like, I was just like, to my animus, I just happened in a conversation. I was just like, oh, just, I don't want to spend any more than half an hour on this. Just take over. And I had my cup of tea and my fag. And you know what? By the time I had that, I know exactly what to write. I knew exactly what to do. I wrote it all out and sent it in emails and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, it kind of took the thinking out of it, because I didn't think about what I was writing. I just let it take over. And then another time when somebody asked me to help with their dreams or whatever, and I was thinking to myself before I had this telephone conversation or whatever, I was like, I really don't know what to say to the person. Do you know what I mean? I thought, I don't know how to help them. And it's kind of like, I don't know what happened, but I just kind of imagined that she was okay. I just thought, however I help her, I hope that she's okay and pleased. And again, something just took over, and I knew exactly what to say and knew exactly what to do, and it all sort of flowed. And it was just like, oh, right. Okay. So I think I had been wondering how I could work with the animus more, rather than just, you know, random here and there kind of situations. And then Azine today, she comes up with how to actually work with this. So it's like, I'm so like overjoyed with that. So thank you, Azine, and thank you, everybody.
Well, thanks, Kat. Great to hear how somebody's working with their anima and animus. Dahlia?
Okay. Hello. Okay, so first, I was still thinking about what Tim said, and hopefully I will watch the video again, I think. So it's good it's recorded. And it makes very much sense to me, because I'm trying now like to map out the process, what's going on, what's like, what I'm doing, because I noticed like the pull is both ways. It's like you can feel it's both ways, and what's going on, I go to the kind of I'm looking kind of external validation or something like that. I don't go to, I know, my energy goes somewhere outside the window. I don't know how to manage it. And then I was thinking, I had a dream and about that like yellow dress and green trousers and red socks, and then did some work on symbols and colors, and it made me a little bit to calm down, like, because I kind of don't trust the intuition at all. So I'm looking for the like, okay, does it mean like this? I'm trying to analyze the things which make no use, no sense, no, I don't know the purpose. So I don't have the results to share, but this is kind of the thing I'm trying to figure out how am I, what's going on and how do I act and what I can change maybe, I don't know.
So it's important to understand that it is something that happens in the man, and you're not. It is not just you doing things, Dahlia. You know,
Yes,
it happens inside the man, and it's hard to. Yes, I
but
just.
I have my part to play in a way. What do I
Yes, of
do?
course. Yes.
And then
Yes, and you are so beautiful. So I understand.
thank you,
Mm.
thank you. Okay, cool. Yeah, and I agree. It's sometimes very tempting to use it where you don't have to use it, and so thankfully, I'm getting older.
Thank you for your comment. Charles?
Yeah, I don't know. First of all, I guess I'm glad that I could actually make it today. It's been really difficult to participate in any meetings recently. I wanted to comment on something that Annette said much earlier, but I wasn't really sure if I understood her properly or not. But it was like what I thought she was saying was like, which I could be totally wrong. But I thought at some point she was talking about like, you know, it said that, you know, all we have to do is individuate, um, and that, you know, while that might be true in some regard, that there are more problems than just the problem of everyone individuating. And I don't know, it just made me, it just kind of struck a chord with me and really resonated with me. And I almost feel like the more individuated someone is and the more sane they become, the more they realize how unbelievably insane this world is that we've created. And it might turn into a small rant, but I, you know, I don't know. I have been experiencing the fact that, you know, a lot of people have kind of felt the same way. And it is manifesting itself a lot through, you know, don't hate me, but I'm on TikTok a lot now, and it's just a very interesting look into some of the thoughts and feelings of the younger generation coming up, feeling like they've been born into a world that is just one giant insane asylum. And while in so my thought is, yeah, while individuating obviously is completely necessary, it's almost like I don't know. It's almost like it's going to take more than that. It's going to take like literally my thought is it's going to take some sort of universal act of God to save this place. I know it sounds really negative, but the thing is, I mean, I think it's completely possible though. We need a miracle, but I think a miracle can totally happen. I don't see why not. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to share the fact that I've been getting this very interesting, unique look into the psyche of the kind of younger generation coming up, and seeing this psychic disturbance that's been occurring. And yeah, that's all.
Was it?
Thank you. I know we are running out of time. I try to be quick. So I just want to tell Tim that the idea of living in a mythless time is there's a lot of debates on it. I wrote something on it. I will send it to you. But Jung basically said that we are living in we're going to live in a mythless world. And then later in our time, Jane Austen, she was very excited, declaring that new myths are coming forward, and she was really happy about it. Joseph Campbell, he said something that might be of interest to you. He said that the cultures, the personal or cultural myths are dying, and a global myth is forming. The next step is having global myths. And he predicted that myths around the climate change, the globe, the green movement, these are going to be the global myths, where the global myth is going to happen. So there's another Jungian, he says that in the time when Jung was living, they had the luxury of waiting for the new myths to come alive. We don't have this luxury in our time, because he names a few myths that are coming forward, and they're very destructive. Wotan was one of them. So he believes that we have to willingly and consciously start creating new myths. And that's where this emphasis of storytelling is coming in leadership and everything. Everybody is about storytelling. So I will send that, I will find that, I will send it to you. And the other thing that may relate to your work on contemporary art, I think more people are using techniques to connect to unconscious. Previously, artists were channels. They didn't do anything about it. Some were talented and they were receivers of these waves of unconscious. Nowadays, people, their workshops, they teach you how to work with your left hand, how to connect to your unconscious. And I think connecting to unconscious is just the first step in creating art. You have to have the technique as the container for this content. You know, you have to work years and years. Nobody's putting that effort anymore. They don't think they need to learn drawing. And they just create something connected to unconscious. And it is art, but it won't be the highest form of it. So yeah, it's a very interesting subject to me as well. Thank you.
Great. I'd like that paper too.
I emailed it to you. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Gary, for that wonderful tarot explanation. And Dahlia, thank you. We hope we still haven't answered your question yet, but Charles and Azine and Ava and Kat and Annette and Tim, and I can't see everybody. Well, anyway, thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Take
Okay.
care, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank
Cat,
you.
yes.
Bye-bye.
Diane, I forgot.